All right, we're back. So I was talking about fitting quad lights back onto the KE70 in the last video, or maybe in my last post, I can't really remember. But the reason that they're not on there at the moment is because Jaden had a little bit of an accident. The description was he was engaging warp speed and kangaroo just jumped out in front of him. No, not really. I can't even remember what happened. But he's fine. It wasn't a big issue. The other car was completely fine, but the KE70 copped it. So flat front went on. You can see here the broken pieces. So I've just pulled them out because I couldn't really remember what was broken and what wasn't. It's a shame that the driver's side got hit and not the passenger side, because then I could sort of mock something up with the turbo intake on the passenger side, but maybe I'll just try and source a new trim, and I could probably bend this bucket out. This would probably be okay. So new trim and then 2 new lights. So I don't know what they're going for at the moment. I don't know if they're like money or something like that, but if they're not $1 million and you've got a driver's side or a pair that you want to sell, let me know. Otherwise, flat front's going to have to stay on for a little bit longer, but I've got a couple more trim pieces that I can put back on the car that I took off in the meantime, and let's see what else we can find. Hopefully you can see from there, obviously just the center console is going to go back in, as well as the steering column shroud. I had it off because I was going to do a model and incorporate a gauge into there like I did for my KE25. I might chuck a picture in now. I can't actually remember if I started modeling that up or not. I think I also started modeling some cup holders as well. So if I did, I'll put pictures of them in now as well. And if I've got models, maybe I'll print some up and test them out. But in the meantime, let's get them in. Right, that's in. Where does that actually mount? Are there actually screw holes there? Oh, there are. There are holes there. Amazing. Obviously, I will be changing this column. I'll be changing this steering wheel back now that we've got the roadworthy. But, oh no, I'm probably going to have to take the wheel off to get this in, aren't I? When I change the wheel over. I'd do it now, but I don't have it with me. So that's that. All right, let's start having a look at the battery relocation. Look at this little guy. Can you see it? Not really. Little huntsman shell. Back to it. Let's see what we got going on in here. Jaden, are you trying to get the car to rust? Look at these quarters. They're so good. Oh, what's that in there? What is that? Open that. Back in there with you. Yep, you can go in there too. See ya. You cheeky little butt. There he is. Man, he got me good. I was not expecting that. I thought he'd be well gone by now, but got me. On here. All right, I'm gonna go relocate him. I need 2 hands. Yeah, that's over. Let's have a look in here. As we can see, there's heaps of space in the KE70 boot. So I'm thinking, I reckon we just go right in the middle there with the battery. Fuel tank is under here. I'm guessing that's fuel pump. And yeah, so no real reason not to just put the battery right up there in the nice flat spot there. So I think I might even have a look here, see if these pop out, which I'm guessing they do. They do. I reckon we'll bolt something there and we'll bolt something there. And when I say something, obviously a board, so that we can mount the battery to that. We don't have to drill any holes in the car. Obviously I realize this car is pretty rough anyway, but I just like not drilling holes in things if I can avoid it. I like to keep the mods reversible for the most part. You know, I don't know, depends on my mood. My mood right now is that, so let's go. Perfect, and that'll be very good. And then that still leaves heaps of room for activities. Start mocking it up. Is that gonna reach? Of course not. To put it on the flats instead. Does that pop up? That does. I don't know if I can see underneath there. The spring, is it? Yeah, I'd say that's probably, well, I thought that was another spider. I'd say that's probably in the middle of the spring perch, which, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I was just thinking it'd be good to run it flat across those two. But let's not overthink it. I said I wouldn't overthink it. I said I was just going to build a race car. I've got other cars that I'm overthinking. So I'm just going to mock up the boot insert with this piece of cardboard, basically. I am doing a much nicer boot insert on my 180SX. I'll cut some of that CAD in now so you can have a look. But let's just get something going. It's not going to be permanent because I'm going to be using these factory hole provisions. So if I wanted to change it at a later date, then there's no harm done because it's completely reversible. Let's do something. So I'll try and get this relatively square. I'll consider this the center. We'll move over to the first hole. Should be there. Oh no, penny for every time I've had this problem. It's that one. That's pretty good. I want this to end. I reckon if I end it about here, that'll give me enough clearance for everything there. And then, I mean, ideally, I'd make it come around enough to sort of fill this little shape here, which I'll just sort of draw a little picture there so that I can remember, just because it'd probably look a bit nicer than just cutting off, but we'll see. Now that that's out of the way, I'll just confirm a couple of measurements. Usually when people design things, when they're professional designs, they'll often be in round numbers. And I like to try and keep things in round numbers as much as possible to keep things predictable. So this measures from that back edge there almost 300 to this radius. So you can see there's a cutout, but then also there's a radius over the edge as well from where it will have been folded, because this would have been a pressed piece of steel, and then that's where it's been joined. I reckon I would like it to just come and cover this edge here, which if I keep it at 300 is a pretty nice round number. And then when I've got it in, if I need to trim off, radius the edges or something like that, that's not a big deal. So I'm going to go back to my piece of paper. I'm going to measure 300 mils down from the top, and then I'm going to cut a nice straight line across it, and then I'm going to bring it back in, and I'm going to poke these holes through so that I can line them up nice and even, and I'm going to check what that radius is there. So we'll do that now. So you can see this is where I marked it before, and that was about 285. So even if I'm a little bit bigger here, we can always cut more off later, but we can't put more back on. Well, I suppose you can. I could sticky tape some on there, but I don't want to do that. Measure twice, cut once. Double check that. So I measured it the same way, we're using the same datum. We are good. Straight edge, outline across. So even though I already marked these holes before, and I could have cut them out now, there's no harm in just coming back and checking it again just to make sure that everything's okay and that I didn't slide it when I marked them in the first place, because again, once I've cut them out, then if I need to move them, it'll be frustrating. And it will also be obvious. So we can see this is looking pretty good here, the way that it is. And now that we haven't got all this excess here, when I try and fold this piece in, it'll be a bit more forgiving. But before I do that, I'd like to mark these two holes and get them out of there. And I might even just drop a bolt through there so that they don't move, so that all the future changes that I make, I know that this will be in the correct position. Poke it through. Let's grab some bolts. Oh, actually, you know what? I reckon those holes are going to go straight into the frame rails. I reckon that's what that is. Chassis rails, right here. Right there. I reckon that drains into there and then out of there. And I'm not going to be able to get a bolt in. Probably can't see. Can you see that little bit of light? There you go. Right there. Straight into the chassis rail. So classic scenario where I talked a whole bunch of shit about not wanting to cut holes in things and wanting to keep things reversible, which I do, but we haven't really got much choice. So going to drill a couple of holes. If there was an option not to, then I would take that, but we don't really have that option. So time to drill some holes. Before I drill the holes, I can still use what's there to center this, and everything that I said before with respect to that remains true. M10 can fit this 10 mil. Let's just get something done, because otherwise this will be another one of my projects that goes on forever. And I don't know if you can see on the camera there, but that is still bang in the center. So even if I measured it, it probably would have ended up more or less how it is now. So that's nice. Where I've marked this is still going to be not enough cut off, but it's going to let me see more of what's going on there, because if I go too much, I can't put it back on. So let's trim that bit off and then see where we're at. So, wow, that's actually pretty good. You can see where I tore it before by pressing too hard, but yeah, look, that's probably going to need to come right up to this edge. Anyway, wants to sit flat. So let's try that. If I was keeping this hole here as the mounting hole, I probably would be a little bit concerned with how close this is to that edge. Not much material left there, but I'm not, so it doesn't matter. And you know what? The bits of timber that I've got are pretty decent in size. I would love to just fill this a little bit in here, but before I do, let's fold it in half and cut the other piece. Let's see how close I was to marking the middle before. Oh, not that close. So you can see how much I'm off by. So I'm going to go back to the bench and I'm going to measure how far across this is from that edge. I'm going to do the same at the bottom. I'm going to draw a line, so then this will be my center line. Fold it along that line. And then when I do, this will be pulled back, something like this. I can cut along this edge, cut along this edge, and then it should meet up perfectly. You can even kind of see now, when I match the two holes up, the access that I've got. So, looking good. So, this measures 460. I do have a longer steel rule, but I'm just using, hopefully, what are pretty accessible tools at the moment. I'm sure you can get a flat bit of steel. You're going to need this for something else later. You could use a flat bit of timber, whatever that may be, and then tape measure. You got one of those. This bit of cardboard I just got off a friend who does printing, but I mean, you could use anything. You could use an old box, you could use paper, pretty much whatever you want. But now we'll fold on the line. It looks like I didn't measure correctly before. For some reason, when I folded this in half, this top edge is what was already there. This is what I cut before. Obviously, I did not a very good job of measuring that distance before. So I don't know what I did wrong. Off by what, 10 mils? So lucky pickup. This still measures 300 here. And when I get to this back edge here, we are at 290. So obviously I was too busy talking shit before and measured it wrong. So it can happen, everyone makes mistakes, but I know that this one is 300 here, and so what I'm going to do is just mark this so that I know when I come back later, I need to use this bottom edge when I make my final template. Nothing else changes from this top edge because this datum has remained the same. It's just this bottom edge that will be different, so we're all good. So now I will cut this out. So let's chuck this bad boy back in there and see where we're at. It needs to be enlarged slightly because I may have pushed it across a little bit, but that's all right. As long as that bit stays in the middle, we are all good. I reckon that's looking pretty spot on. I'm going to cut both edges down slightly so that that matches. Normally I would try and fill this little bit here to bring it out, but I don't really see an advantage in doing that, to be honest. I might even completely just Maybe I'll just pull it in. Let's put it on there. We'll put it on. I'm going to cut this out, and then when I transfer this onto the bit of timber, I'm going to make more accurate measurements. So like I was saying before, round numbers. So a few of these will probably be off. I'll probably bring this in just a little bit more from the edges, but we'll make it look nice. So coming back to this for a second, seeing as I've decided that I can't use those, I might as well put at least 3 fixing points for that board. Probably the wider, well, actually wider the better, considering that I'm going to be mounting something in the center here. So I'm going to come close to the chassis rail, but obviously not all the way. So I'm going to go one here, one in the middle, and then another one there, mirrored to both sides. And then once I mount it that way, I will put studs on the underside for the battery tray, and should be good to go. Okay, you can see here how I've just marked out that distance, which is 390. I've put a right angle on here so that I can get a straight line down from that top edge. And then I can see that these two edges here more or less mirror each other. If I fold that over the top, over the edge there, we can see that they're pretty close, but not identical. You can see that even if this part here was to extend out to there where it should, they're not going to be identical to one another. And often cars are not. They'll look symmetrical, but they are not completely symmetrical. So unless my template is completely off, which is possible, I suspect that the boot on the KE70 is not perfectly symmetrical, which is not uncommon. It will still look symmetrical when it's in, which is actually what we care about, because aesthetically, to look at it, you won't be able to tell the difference unless you were to get in there and measure it. So if I made this perfect and then put it in the car, you would be able to see that it was off, and this would look wrong. The car wouldn't look wrong. So, you know, you could sit there and explain to everyone, no, this is perfect, it's the car that's wrong, but that's not really what you're doing. You're trying to marry the two together. You want them to look good. We'll put this on the timber, we'll cut it out, and then we'll decide how we're going to mount it. So I've just realized how dark it's getting because we don't have daylight savings anymore. So I'm not going to start cutting up that timber now, but what I will do is plan out how I'm going to mount the straps for securing the battery to it. And I'll also go over what I decided on doing for the cam degree wheel for the KE25. So I've got that printing now. I don't know if you can hear it in the background. I'll go over with the camera and show you now. And hopefully that works. I've got a couple of ideas for what to do if it doesn't work. Ideally, you wouldn't 3D print something like this in this orientation when you're going to be applying shear stress to it, which is what will happen. I use the socket on it to turn the crank. However, there shouldn't be too much load on it. There's no compression in there. So we'll see how we go. If it doesn't work, I've got some ideas for how I can make it work, but let's just try the most simplest way first. And then again, like with the other car, if it doesn't work, I can kind of go through with you and show you what my process is for thinking about ways to overcome problems. Part of it printing just there. I'll drop in some of the CAD for you so that you can see what the finished part will look like. Alright, so it's a new day and we're almost out of time for this video, I think, but these are finished printing, so I thought I'd show you before I end it. This has come out amazingly well and fits perfectly onto the crank. The only thing is that when I modeled the threads, I made a change higher in the tree and then I exported it because I was in a hurry, and I somehow lost my chamfer on the end and my threads don't go together. So I will fix the model and I will reprint it, but I'd still like to test it all together before I do that in case I have to make any more changes. So I'm going to chuck this in the lathe and try and put a chamfer on there and see if I can get these two to thread together and mock this all up. If that works, then I'll make the change and I'll print a new one, and hopefully my dial gauge arrives today or tomorrow, and I can also do the timing on the KE25. Anyway, let's go chuck this in the lathe and see if I can't get them together. Imagine this didn't, I know it'll fit. I knew it would fit. And normally I'd probably put something in here to protect the surfaces as well, but like I said, this is still just a test piece and not the final one, so I'm not too worried. Always wear goggles. Done. So I will need to update the model. You can see how I've turned it down there. Doesn't look great, but this fits. This thread's on, and they look pretty good, I reckon. That's all there is to it, really. Satisfying sound of fitting the 8th drive in there. Yeah, good to go. See you in the next one.